What is happening, everybody? My name is Bright Life. This is my fancy shirt. No, I've not cleaned my room and I never will. And today I want to welcome you to a brand new series called State of the MMO. I'm going to play an MMORPG, give you my first impressions, let you know kind of how things are going in the game as far as system and population health, and then I'm going to let you know, should you download this game and play it? Should you skip it for a little bit until a new update comes out? Or should you just skip it altogether? And today we're going to be starting this series off with Dungeons & Dragons Online. Now, Dungeons & Dragons Online, or DDO for short, is a free, award-winning, massively multiplayer online game based on the beloved RPG that started it all. It's based on the authentic 3.5 rule set gameplay in the form of a free MMORPG. You can play it free to play, you can adventure alone or with friends from all over the world. You can create a unique hero with a very unique and in-depth character customization pathway. You get to explore a rich and beautiful world, and of course, maybe spend a little bit of money on the cash shop as you go through. Now, the reason that I personally chose to play DDO as my first stop in this State of the MMO video series is because Standing Stone Games, who's the producer of this game, is also the producer of my favorite MMO of all time, Lord of the Rings Online. I've spent a lot of my time over the last year in this world of LOTRO, and really, I've been so impressed by the story, the world immersion, the community, and the ability to be just an absolute super Tolkien nerd in the midst of it. I was really excited to see what SSG would do with another MMO based on a really beloved IP, and to be totally honest with you, I'm also really excited because I personally really love the show Stranger Things. I kind of want Hopper to be my dad. There's something about him.
Marissa, hey, it's not gonna work out. Sorry I wasted your time. I'm a dick.
Yep.
And you know, the Dungeons & Dragons part is cool too. So let's jump into our first impressions, where I really got to play this game and find out that Dungeons & Dragons Online is really both helped and hindered by its D&D roots. But hey, that's a little bit for later on in the video. Let's jump into my gameplay. But hey, before we jump into the video, just a real quick plug. If you don't mind hitting that like button for me, it actually really helps me be seen by other people that love MMOs just like you and I do. So hit that like button for me and then leave me a comment. Have you played DDO before, and what was your experience, even as I'm going through my first impressions? Okay, let's jump into it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my initial gameplay experience was a little bit rough with Dungeons & Dragons Online, but it was such a fun, and it's a 16-year-old game that it's kind of in like a lovable way. It's like, you know, if that makes sense. It's kind of like when a puppy falls down the stairs, you know, it's adorable, even though it's kind of sad, you know, it's kind of that way. The first thing that happened when I started to download the game was I was accepting the EULA agreement, you know, like that normal agreement that you never read and probably sell your first child away to whenever you accept it with any MMO that you play. But it said that this was an agreement that I was entering into with Turbine Incorporated, which was Standing Stone's like predecessor company for both LOTRO and DDO. Don't know why that is, but I guess I'm in some sort of binding agreement with a dead company. Whoops. Also, the game crashed the first time I tried to play it, but hey, we're playing an MMO, and I think that's just kind of part of the territory. But the initial cutscene that I jumped into was awesome. It told a great story. It did use a lot of words that I didn't necessarily understand, because this is where I'll admit to you that I've never actually gotten the opportunity to play Dungeons & Dragons like in real life before. It's not because I don't want to, it's just because I don't have any friends.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
But actually, I think that's actually okay, because if an MMO is going to be a mass market, mass appealing thing, it kind of has to move past its IP and deliver on great gameplay, engaging story that can bring in even the outsider. I mean, as a great example, when I played Final Fantasy XIV earlier this last year, I found myself really enjoying the game for the gameplay and the story, even though I'm not really a big JRPG fan and I've never played a Final Fantasy game before myself. The gameplay and the story was enough to really pull me through, and so I'm hoping that Dungeons & Dragons Online can do that as well. Now, as I'm creating my character, I am immediately struck by the incredible class variety. Every single class seems to have 3 subclasses running through different specializations, which is awesome. And what's crazy is that's just the beginning. After a moment of deciding what I'm going to do with my arms as I'm building my character, and I did have to avoid the dude with the very massive forehead. I've already got one of those in real life, and
That's quite big.
And I'm trying to live out my fantasy in D&D land. So I create a human fighter because I'm extraordinarily original, named Bright Life TTV, and I set out into the world. And immediately, wow, fully voice acted quests.
Find yourself waking on a shore of flotsam. Memories of a large white dragon striking your ship come flooding back.
Oi, you ain't undead, are you?
For a 16-year-old game, that is really, really solid. And that's when I start to understand that the voice acting is actually a dungeon master from a D&D campaign, which is a great touch. This is one of DDO's biggest strengths as I played it, which is its ability to be faithful to the IP, to the lore, to the D&D that it's trying to represent, and understand that as a game based on an IP, you're supposed to honor that IP, not fight it. I think that there have been a lot of, television series and movies and things like that that tend to try to fight their intellectual property.
There's a tempest in me.
Standing Stone Games has always done a great job of saying, okay, we're making a Lord of the Rings game, we are going to be extremely faithful to that original text. And obviously that's carried over here to DDO because, this dungeon master is there actually guiding you through the dungeon. In fact, later on in the game, I walked into a room that some kobolds had put up a barricade over, and the dungeon master actually says, you walk into a room and find it barricaded by the kobolds. You can't do anything with the barrier. It's really just a side room that you might even miss, but the attention to detail here is really awesome. So again, this isn't a surprise coming from SSG. I think they deserve a lot of credit with LOTRO and honoring Tolkien's work, and I think that they deserve a lot of credit here with Dungeons & Dragons Online and honoring the D&D that it comes from. As I go through my first dungeon, I find out that I get a spell of not dying, which seems like it will be very useful later on. I'm sure it'll crop up later. Nope. Jeets turns out to be a bit of a perv, saying that he wants to watch her backside.
Don't you worry, Salimus. I'm here to watch your behind now.
Yikes.
Gotta watch out, man. It's 2022. It ain't 2006 anymore. And we make it through the first of our dungeon crawls. Now, of course, the game honors D&D by being very faithful to the dungeon crawl mechanic and aesthetic. Essentially, the game does act a little bit like the original Guild Wars if you played that, which was, of course, inspired by D&D, where the main cities act as almost the MMO capitals, where there's the quests and you can see some other people in the world, and the fighting takes place in instanced zones. And in this case, instanced delves and dungeons. In the first few towns, they're typically like, little bandit hideouts or kobold caves, and that's a pretty cool mechanic. Now, it's not my personal favorite. It's not really my flavor of MMO. I love the open world MMO and being able to just kind of run around and see people out in the wild, but that's what they decided to go with, and so it is cool to see them honoring D&D in that way. Now, there are a few bugs here and there with discovery and the search skill, and this is unfortunate, especially in a new player experience. In my opinion, with an MMO, especially in a 16-year-old game, you got to take out as many bugs as you possibly can because this is a first impression moment. This is the first 2 hours of the game, and that's really important. But the fighting is actually pretty impressive for a 16-year-old game with light attacks, heavy attacks, skill blocking. I'm a little bit underwhelmed initially by the initial skill tree and active skills that you can use, but I do know that this changes later in the game. We'll talk about buildcraft in a moment, but this game has a lot of skills, and if you go onto Twitch and you watch some of the awesome streamers that are over there in that category, you'll see that there is a lot to work with later in the game. But initially, I think I maybe have one active skill attack, and it's really just kind of an armor reducer. It's not really necessary, and so I was a little bit underwhelmed by that. But it was cool to see the combat in this action MMO kind of seem to predate some of the newer MMOs out there that use action combat RPG styles. Now, I bring down my first boss, and I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the lack of difficulty on this boss. I know this is a starter experience, but based on my full first impression, I never really saw the enemies get that much more difficult. I'm sure they do as the game goes on, but it is a pretty easy to play game, which falls in line with a little bit like the Lord of the Rings Online with Standing Stone Games, where typically it's not a really difficult game. It's there really just to enjoy and kind of immerse yourself in, which can be good and bad. Now, I was a little bit unpleasantly surprised by the next thing that I found. I was exploring the talent trees, which are extensive, more on that in just a minute, and I found out that I could specialize into a pet having class as like a human fighter, and I was really pleased with my current DPS output, but I was like, man, it'd be cool to take a human fighter class and have them have, some sort of pet class alongside, and paywall. Unfortunately, some of the cooler talent trees are locked behind paywalls, but it is a free-to-play game. You're gonna have to make money somehow, so not super mad about this one. And the game is really free to play up until you hit expansions, so I'm not too mad about it. And I just gotta say this. These talent trees are incredible, immensely customizable. Each of the classes seems to have between 6 and 8 different talent trees that you can spend points in, and these are very extensive trees. And then when you max out these trees, you can actually reincarnate. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. And you get some bonus passive skills as you specialize into even more trees. This game is all about the build craft, and as I did a lot more research into some further guides, everything is really about that class build that you have. It's an extremely customizable experience, which again is really all about the D&D experience. It's all about allowing that experience to seep through and pour into your gameplay experience, which is an awesome thing. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if there is one thing that DDO does better than any other MMO, it's probably class building. It's really that good. If that's something that you personally love, you gotta at least give this game a try, because it's incredible how deep it gets. In fact, if there were no online guides and there was no like online advice, I highly doubt that you could build an identical class to the person across the town from you, just because it's so customizable.
Unique. You're a unique person.
Very, very, very impressive, and I would say hats off to DDO for that one. Really cool, super faithful to D&D. It's awesome. Now, as I went through the towns, there were an okay number of players. I wouldn't say that this is a very populated game, even compared to some of the maybe more niche games like Lord of the Rings Online, or a game that's more IP-based like Star Wars: The Republic. This one definitely has less players. But what was really cool about this game that I've found very similar to games like Lord of the Rings Online and some of the smaller MMOs that I've played is the community is absolutely out of this world awesome. They are extremely friendly, extremely nice. The people that I did end up grouping up with and the people that I did talk to were over the top talkative, extremely friendly and nice, and they were very welcoming to the game, which is a huge positive. And especially when it comes to an MMO, the one thing that a dev can't really control is the way the community interacts with one another, and that was a really cool thing to see. In fact, in the content creation side, there are actually quite a few great content creators in this space. I want to give a massive shout out to Tough_RPG on Twitch. I'm going to link him below. I actually got to go into his stream and just ask a couple of questions randomly, and he was over the top friendly, super welcoming, gave me lots of great tips. So that's a cool positive to this game, that the community seems to be very nice, but there's also a lot of great content creators out there in this game. So shout out to you, Tough. Now, I continued to go through this gameplay experience, and it was kind of a rotation of a game experience where you go to a new town, you pick up a quest, go do the dungeon, which is typically some sort of fetch quest or kill X number of this. You go back, turn your quest in, and then you get your experience and move on throughout the game. There was a main storyline experience. It's all very voice acted, but that just kind of seems to be the rotation and movement of this game. The max level is 32, and as I went to the main city hub of the game, there were quite a number of level 32s out there, and the transmog game looks really cool. The mounts actually look pretty decent as well, but for the most part, it turns into a very basic MMO at that point. You know, go pick up a quest, go finish the quest, bring it back. There's nothing really that stands out about DDO as far as MMO mechanics go, outside of the build craft. You know, you don't really get dynamic world events like you get in Guild Wars 2. You may not necessarily get these big world quests that happen like over in World of Warcraft. It's just kind of a very basic move through the game experience. And I ended my playthrough by going through a couple of the dungeons in the main town, and I'm not really gonna lie, I didn't necessarily get caught by the game on this one. I think that typically by the time I spend 4 to 6 hours on an MMO, typically I have an idea of whether or not I'm going to continue or if I'm just kind of bored and I want to stop. And I think that this one, the dungeons felt kind of routine. The game is very, very niche, but it's not really a niche that I'm personally into. The game just feels a little bit old. It doesn't really feel like it's been updated very well over the last 16 years. But if I may be a little bit bold, I actually think that's kind of the point of Dungeons & Dragons Online. Now, hear me out. I actually don't necessarily think that DDO is designed to make me enjoy it. Now I know what you're thinking. Bright Life, Turbine did not retroactively create a game 16 years ago that specifically you do not like. And to which I would say, dude, I'm a narcissistic YouTuber and Twitch streamer. Anything is possible in this brain of mine.
At least you're honest.
No, I think the point is that Dungeons and Dragons Online is so faithful to D&D that I don't know if the casual MMO fan is really going to love it if they don't have a love for Dungeons and Dragons Online. Think about it. There's that group of friends that when you get together and play D&D with your friends in real life, you get together on that Friday night, you've got your table, you've got your characters, you've got your campaign, your dungeon master, your drinks, your snacks. Those are sacred spaces for the Dungeons and Dragons fan. It's a place to feel safe in being a nerd. It's a place to feel known by a group of friends that's just as nerdy as you are. It's a space to be safe in your nerddom. And I think that D&D isn't necessarily designed as a game to be heavily evangelized. It's very much, if you have someone that you trust, you invite them into this inner circle and that's what you play. And I think DDO is kind of the same way. I think DDO as an MMORPG is very basic. It's very rote and routine, but for the Dungeons and Dragons player, it might just be the magic that you're looking for because of the faithfulness to the IP, because it has the dungeon master that narrates everything that you do, because this game works with dice rolls, and because it works with deep character customization. This game is perfect for the Dungeons and Dragons fan. So as far as the state of this MMO, it's interesting. It depends on really who you are as a player. Are you someone that adores and loves Dungeons and Dragons Online, or are you someone that just kind of knows about it from Stranger Things like me, and you may not necessarily be hooked by the things that really make DDO DDO. So should you download, wait for an update, or skip this game entirely? Like I said, it depends on who you are. If you don't play D&D like me, this is probably going to be a skip for you. DDO doesn't have an awesome PvP system. It's not really new player friendly outside of the community. The systems are very complex, very deep, and it kind of just throws you right in. There's not really a true open world like most of us have come to expect from an MMORPG, and the player count is pretty low compared to most MMORPGs. And to be totally honest with you, the action combat, even though it's impressive for a 16-year-old game, doesn't really stand up to the standard of the MMORPG with action combat today. If you're looking for the things that I just talked about, Guild Wars 2 exists. Elder Scrolls Online exists. Black Desert Online exists. And if I could just say, like, for Guild Wars 2, it's free to play. That game alone covers all the weaknesses I just talked about and delivers on the MMO elements of DDO in spades. But again, I think that's kind of the point, and I don't necessarily know if a DDO player would disagree with me on that one. I think that the DDO player knows that this is a game for the Dungeons and Dragons fan. This is the game for you to play on the days where you're not sitting around the table with your dungeon master, with your friends, and experiencing that safety of fellow nerdiness. So what I'd say is the state of the game, if you're not a D&D fan, is probably not very strong. It's a skip. But if you are, this might just be the game for you. If you're a true Dungeons and Dragons fan and you're looking for an MMO that honors the heck out of the original spirit of the game, that is still revolutionizing the RPG genre with its influence, then DDO might be for you. DDO is an homage to one of the greatest tabletop games of all time. It exists to put forth the spirit of safety that D&D players all feel when they're sitting around that table together. It honors the D&D fan with a fully voice-acted dungeon master, even for side quests and minor events. It works on the dice roll system and prominently showcases that with every move that you do. And the class customizability, the puzzles from the dungeons are honestly second to none in the MMORPG genre. Dungeons and Dragons Online respects its original IP so much to the point where it honestly pushes out players who don't have an appreciation for D&D. And honestly, as a super nerd who loves great community online, who appreciates when a publisher is brave enough to not fight the IP, but to embrace it, and as someone who is a huge super nerd just in a different IP realm, I gotta say, that's actually pretty freaking awesome. Friends, I want to thank you so very much for watching the first State of the MMO. Friends, if you liked the video, please hit that like button. It actually really does help me out a lot. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button down below. And friends, as always, the last two things that I say are the most important thing that I can say in any video ever. And it's this, that you are more loved than you know, and you are so much more valuable than you realize. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. I want to let you know a couple ways to connect with me. First of all, we got an awesome Discord in the description. We've got a Patreon if you'd like to give to the channel and help support more video creation. And I am live on Twitch quite often over at twitch.tv/brightlifecommunity. Would love to see you there. Always love interacting on those live video streams. But I hope you have an incredible day, my loved and valued friend. Have an awesome one.